Sometimes even good people can make a mistake. And when it happens, it's one of the most intense and emotional experiences of your life. It could be a DUI, or maybe you were in the wrong place with the wrong people at the wrong time. Or perhaps you just did something stupid at the spur of the moment without even thinking, and now you're in trouble with the law. Well, you need experienced legal help right away so you don't become a victim of the criminal justice system. Even good people can make a mistake, and if you, a friend, or a loved one has been accused of a crime, don't make another mistake by hiring the wrong attorney for the kind of help you need. You need to visit toddjohnslaw.com. That's toddjohnslaw.com, and then call Attorney Todd Johns today. Attorney Todd Johns has decades of experience helping good people like you who have made mistakes or bad decisions and will stand by you every step of the way. toddjohnslaw.com.
And hello, welcome to That's Enough Out of You. I am your host, Mr. Bill Rader, and joining me, my co-host, man with a plan, is Sean Kane. Sean, what's going on? How you doing?
Billy Reyes, what's up, buddy? We got a great guest today, all the way down under.
That's right. Paul Abbott rejoins us again. How are you, Paul? Good to see you.
Hi, Sean. Hi, Bill. Good to be with you guys. I've been looking forward to it, and I have to say, whenever we catch up, it's like I'm having a beer or a cup of coffee with a couple of mates. So
usually you're in the morning and we're at night.
I promise this is coffee.
Doesn't bother us if it is.
No judgment here, Paul.
Good to catch up.
Good to see you.
Yeah, we got a lot to discuss, Paul, and let's just start with anything new in your research, because I know you're always I follow your Substack and on Twitter, and you always got great stuff, and I know there's a lot of new stuff in your research. So let's start there, and we'll just head down that avenue.
Yeah, sure. So I gather we last spoke before JFK led to the conference last year. So I must admit I went to that, and that'd be worth talking about because that was amazing. But I went there with the intention of that would kind of be a bit of a closing chapter on on the last few years of work on the Oswald shooting, but it's been anything but since. But just if I could touch on the conference for a while, I know you guys supported that last year, but if it's happening again this year, I'd just really recommend to as many of your audience as possible to get along in person. It's so worthwhile. My now wife and I travelled from the other side of the world to be there, and it was amazing. For me personally, it wasn't the first time I've been to Dallas, but to actually now meet people that I've long followed and corresponded with. It was just amazing. Bill Simpich, meeting J. Gary Shaw, Robert Bowden again, Scott Reed.
Not too long ago.
Yeah. Well, Bill Simpich, he's probably he's the way he goes about his work is incredibly detailed and methodical, and again, he's another very good case that you don't have to agree with every single thing, or piece of work or notion that someone comes out with. You don't have to agree with them, but you respect their work, how they go about it, and so Bill Simpich, it was great to give him a copy of my book because I do mention him in there as an inspiration, and so many others. It was crazy. Joe Borelli, Matt Crumpton, Jess Connell. It was really cool. I even did took some people on tours around the City Hall building. We weren't able to get in to Dallas City Hall, but arguably most of the most interesting bits from the outside anyway. So yeah, just amazing. I bumped into Andrew Eiler and Mark Adamczyk. I know they're friends of your show as well.
Yeah,
so
good friends.
Just truly surreal, and then to be able to present at the conference and Chris Gallup's symposium was awesome. So I would just recommend to your audience to please get along to the conference if you're able to. In person, it's so important that these things happen. Keep on going. The networks that you build and people you get to meet, the chats and all that. It's amazing. So I'll just start off on that front, but like I say, going to Dallas, I thought that'd be a bit of a closing of the chapter for the foreseeable on the Oswald shooting. But with subsequent conversations I've had and meeting other researchers, I've been able to just get little tips and leads and hints, and it's really brought me to this point now, which is, as we're talking now, I'm just embarking on launching a bit of a series that absolutely questions the evidence that it was Jack Ruby in the basement that shot Lee Harvey Oswald. It sounds crazy, and I know that people hearing that for the first time might put me in prank territory, but if we want to get serious about it, there's actually the evidence that tracks or that can be tracked alongside Jack Ruby on that morning of the 24th of November is incredibly tenuous. Whether you believe that he was at his apartment until 20 past 10 that morning, and then just simply drove to the Western Union office to transfer money to Little Lynn, or if he somehow was at City Hall much earlier than that, and was in the elevator with Reverend Rushing. The evidence, the testimonies are very, very tenuous to a degree. So that really got me thinking. How firm actually is the physical evidence that that Jack Ruby was the shooter of Lee Harvey Oswald? Because I'll tell you this as well, guys. I've got Rob Caprio to thank for this. The physical evidence linking Jack Ruby to the Oswald shooting is lost. The bullet that was pulled out of Lee Harvey Oswald during his autopsy. Apparently, the story goes that Jim Lavelle gave it to, made sure that Audrey Bell, the attending nurse, the assisting nurse rather, carved initials on the bullet, as some kind of preserving the chain of custody. The next time that bullet was supposedly to appear anywhere was in Jack Ruby's trial the following March. And even then, if you have a look at the trial transcripts, it's entered as some kind of deposition, but there's no discussing or examining the bullet during the trial. So we've only got Bill, Assistant District Attorney Bill Alexander's word to go on that the bullet even made it as far as the trial. After that, shoots out of thin air, it's gone. And the other thing that really shook me was that the revolver that Ruby allegedly used to shoot Oswald, that wasn't allowed to be examined, not by the FBI. The Warren Commission never got to look at it. Henry Wade kept it locked away, and it was only after Ruby himself died that his estate was executed. The gun was given to I think it was someone Moyers. Anyway, and as we've probably seen subsequently, it's been bandied about in auctions and things like that. So, that just got me thinking. Physical evidence, that could have been used to positively link Jack Ruby, the act of him shooting Oswald. Even that, wasn't properly carried out. And again, with recent murmurings about the Charlie Kirk assassination, and you're seeing in parts of the media that the 30-06 bullet that was apparently said to have impacted Charlie Kirk's neck can't be linked to the gun, and that was alleged to Tyler Robinson. So that just, to me, I don't know if anyone else, but to me that just immediately took me back to, well, geez, the same thing could be said about Ruby shooting Oswald. Physical evidence, where are we without it? So really, that's just sent me, I'm not going to say a rabbit hole, because when I put together my book, Death to Justice, the shooting of Lee Harvey Oswald, I was aware of questions, about the appearance of the back of Oswald's shooter, the hairline looking different to Jack Ruby's own hairline later on in the when you look at mugshots taken that same afternoon. And I was aware of those questions, and people like Ralph and Cinco coming out with really short, sharp headline grabbing articles and moving on. But I just, to me, Death to Justice was really an article about saying everything that's in this book has always been available to us. You know, the investigations, you know, that started obviously straight away with the DPD, the FBI came in, and it looked like they were positioning themselves to be the investigative body that would take over the investigation to obviously the assassination of President Kennedy. All of that has been available, and obviously, you know, the benefit of time with the HSCA, 14, 15 years later, even more material, more evidence and perspectives to gather has always been available to show that something that has been presumed as being relatively open and shut, and I think most of us had a pretty firm question mark over the narrative that Jack Ruby simply walked down the Main Street ramp and happened to be there in perfect timing. Well, I think we all, serious researchers, had question marks about that, but that's largely been it. So my book was about, it was really an exercise of mining the data, the information that's out there. And so that kind of brings me to the point now. It's like, well, geez, how firm are we about the evidence that Jack Ruby actually got a phone call from Karen Carlin? Because, if you look at the FBI reports that they, the phone records that they produced for Bruce Carlin, Karen's husband, because that's where she made her calls to Ruby on that Sunday morning from. Fascinating thing is they picked this phone bill report up from when it was issued on September the 26th of 1963, and they cut out the records as of November the 21st. So why did they do that? And the next time they looked, about 4 or 5 months later, looked into Bruce Carlin's phone records, they only picked them up from the 25th of November. So conveniently leaving out, the entire assassination weekend phone records. Most significantly, proving that Karen Carlin actually did call Jack Ruby at his apartment at a time around 10 o'clock a.m. That's even missing for the record. That is what we can therefore call tenuous. So what I'm doing, I guess, is I'm kind of stepping back and walking down a couple of new chambers in this cave, and to kind of see the Oswald shooting as, and bringing into question the Western Union transfer as well. There's just so much to it, guys. Following the evidence, that's all I'm doing, and asking questions. I'm not predisposed to any outcome, whether it was Jack Ruby who shot Oswald or it was someone else. At this particular point in time, I'm not thinking about that. I'm literally just following the evidence.
We know Ruby was covered. His face was covered real quick. Was it Lewis Miller? I believe that
Lewis Miller, yeah. Yep, 100%. So
are you thinking it's possible that it was there was lookalikes? Is that what you're talking? Because I know a lot of the pictures, are they Ruby? And we know there was Oswald lookalikes everywhere.
Yeah. Whatever was designed with the Oswald shooting, that's what we need to remember, is it wouldn't have been part of the grand plan, like obviously the ambush in Dealey Plaza.
Right, it had to be
and it had to be quick. So we're not going to find any gun documents anymore. There's nothing that's going to be in there that reveals kind of exactly how the Oswald shooting was orchestrated. It was done very quickly. And I think as well, probably to lend further perspective on this, a lot of it was done retrospectively. So a lot of when we see so many gaps in the evidence in terms of witness statements, contradictions and all that, that's the result of the investigative bodies back then doing a hell of a lot of legwork to make some kind of narrative fit, making a lot of square pegs fit into round holes. So I think that's why we've still got a lot of unanswered questions and things like that. But for the life of me, I still cannot work out why else someone like Lewis Miller, acting detective for the Dallas Police Department, would be so ready and prepared. Yeah. Not just to happen to have a bag with him or whatever it was, a coat, that's one thing. But then to react so quickly, he is across the figure and covering the hatless Ruby, or let's call him the shooter, within a second and a half. That's foreknowledge on at least one part of the Dallas police. So right there, why would he do that? If it was so clear cut that it was Jack Ruby, what's the big deal in covering him? Some people have theorized that, well, maybe it was a tactic to disorient the person that was being set upon. Okay, fair enough, but Ruby, the shooter, was surrounded at that point by literally 11 Dallas police personnel. Graves at that time was starting to try to wrench the revolver out of his hand. You had Blackie Harrison, taking up one flank, and everyone was rushing in. There was the shooter was not going anywhere, so no real need to disorient them. So yeah, could it be because it wasn't really Jack Ruby that shot Oswald, and they didn't want any of the cameras or anything like that to capture that? It's a fair point.
Wow.
The first time we actually see Jack Ruby as well conclusively, so no, I don't mean with his back to the cameras or anything like that, is actually in the jail office when he's being led from where he'd been subdued on the ground, and where he was telling everyone, "You all know me, I'm Jack Ruby. What are you doing to me?" We see him being led through the jail office to the elevator to go up to the 5th floor. That's the first time that I think we can safely say that that's where we see Jack Ruby at the scene. And the other point, and this is what my article gets into, is really testing the theory that if Jack Ruby was so well known to so many members of the Dallas police in general, but also there at the scene,
right?
How big a deal would it have been for any of them to say, "Yeah, I saw Jack Ruby there at the transfer. It was no big deal. He was a police groupie. He was a news hound." It probably wasn't right, but Jack Ruby, he positioned himself as tried to position himself as one of us guys at the DPD. He'd been around and was brokering interviews for Ike Pappas and KLIF, with Henry Wade. It wasn't a strange thing to see Jack Ruby at City Hall. So why didn't any of the police personnel, and even Seth Cantor, or even Ike Pappas for that matter, who had dealings, he had interactions with Jack Ruby earlier that weekend, why did none of these people say, "Yeah, I saw Jack Ruby. I didn't really think it was that big a deal because I'd seen him around City Hall for the last couple of days anyway"? No one came out and said that. Everybody's statements were, "I didn't know or didn't recognize it to be Jack Ruby until after the shooting." That's incredibly convenient, and that's what I'm talking about, with the retrospective assertions. So that's what I'm doing. I'm diving deep into the Western Union transfer. We can talk about that. Because that's a time-stamped event, which obviously places Jack Ruby very close to the scene. No less than 150 feet from the Western Union office to the Main Street ramp where he was supposed to have entered. But even then, the Western Union transfer, that's unfortunately not a simple thing either, because the form that he took in was pre-filled out. The guy Doyle Lane, who just happened to be attending to another, apparently it was a woman that no one ever bothered to find the records for or even speak to. Apparently Doyle Lane was busy serving this lady when he noticed that Jack Ruby appeared. And it was a fairly normal transaction. Apparently Ruby just gave him this pre-filled form out, and the transfer was conducted. If you have a look at that form, and this is the detail that I get down into in my new series, it's written in block letters, the form. He even misspells Karen Carlin's surname, or it's actually her maiden name on the form, incorrectly. So it's block letters. And when you compare that to Jack Ruby's, cursive, we call it running writing script type style of writing, the two are completely different. So wow. did Jack Ruby even carry out that form because that transfer because identification wasn't even taken by a door loan, which was kind of part of the process when you're transferring money. Even back then in 1963, that was the deal, is that you could be expected to present ID. Well, Doyle Lane's explanation for that was, well, I recognise Jack Ruby from previous times that he sent off telegrams or wired money. Well, okay, no problems. Where were the records for those? They never surfaced. So was Jack Ruby even a repeated Western Union customer? We can't even back that up. So here we have now is someone that has been recognised as Jack Ruby coming in with a pre-filled form that doesn't even match Jack Ruby's writing. Wow. And do you know what I mean? Like that's what I'm talking about. It could mean nothing. It could well have been just Jack Ruby. That's fine. But my point here is that the evidence, there's no such thing as a lock for anything to do with Jack Ruby on the 24th of November. His movements before then, from the Julia Mercer sighting on the morning of November 22nd, and him inviting someone to come and watch the fireworks, as President Kennedy's motorcade was coming through, and then the newspaper business, and being the grieving Jewish man, distraught for Caroline Kennedy and John Jr. and all that. All of that's a whole other kettle of fish. But for me, it turns out, the Jack Ruby that we see on the morning of November the 24th, he's a pretty. There's no evidence of that hysteria. It's all seems like it's fairly routine based. He's just incredibly still and just very subdued in all of his movements, evidential movements, compared to his activities of that weekend. So I'm just pulling it all to bits, I guess, guys, to really lay out the fact that, right up until the moment of Oswald's shooting, turns out that all the evidence that suggests that Ruby was here and then he walked that way and all this way, it's all very tenuous. And we haven't even talked about the Main Street entry bit either. So, sorry.
No, that's great. What's your feeling on Julianne Mercer and her statement?
Well, I mean, I put, and this is what's good about the JFK movie. I think it states pretty faithfully. She gave a statement to the FBI after November the 22nd, but before Oswald's shooting, with a description of a man that she saw sitting in a pickup truck, and she attributed that description to Jack Ruby, and her signature was she was clearly her statement thereafter was changed, and signature was forged to say that she didn't definitively or confidently identify that.
In the movie, Oliver put that in the movie
quite well, and I'm sure most of your listeners know the story. But she posited that she was pulled up driving through Elm Street about an hour and a half before the assassination, seeing a pickup truck on the parked up on the curb, literally probably in front of where Zapruder would have been standing, I gather, and maybe a little bit further towards the bridge. But anyway, I'm seeing a man take some kind of, it was a case like a rifle case, and walking up to the grassy knoll, and she gave a description of that which didn't match Oswald either, and she saw police on the bridge up ahead watching the whole scene, again just as depicted in JFK.
Right.
So I think that's an interesting story as well. She clearly had her testimony altered.
Yeah. Talk to me about Ruby attorney Tom Howard. Let's talk about him.
Really interesting guy. So I'm not sure if I would have mentioned on your show previously, but it turns out that he was
talked about him. No.
Yeah, so a bit of a man about town. He was, I guess, what you would call the equivalent now of a billboard, huckster kind of lawyer. I'll get you the best deal no matter what. Kind of car crash chasing kind of lawyer. He didn't have a reputation, a good reputation in and he wasn't a high-class lawyer by any stretch. Turns out he was in the basement outside the jail office at the time of the shooting, of the Oswald shooting. Now, his story goes that his offices were across the road at the time, so just across from City Hall on Harwood Street. If you go there now, there's a nice park there, but back in the day, he had offices across from City Hall, and his story was that he walked down into City Hall, down the steps to the basement level, and clearly either knew if there was any Dallas police personnel actually running security up there or not. He was able to walk straight in, and his idea was to get to the go up and see a client of his who was being detained in the jail. So he wanted to walk into the jail office, and one statement it says he says that he got as far as pressing the elevator button to go up in the lift, but he was turned away, and the last thing that anyone said or that he did was look through the jail office window. Just literally, even this isn't clear, I think it was just after Oswald emerged, out of the jail office to start the transfer out of the basement elevator there. And Tom Howard turned to Detective Homer McGee and said, I've seen everything I wanted to see. What the hell does that mean? Of course, really. That was never qualified, that statement. The FBI, because he only ever made one statement to the FBI. And apparently Homer McGee said that Howard simply turned around and walked the way he came out. But that puts Howard, if not there at the time of the shooting, literally in the seconds before, which is very interesting because, of course, in only a matter of a couple of hours, he would present himself as Jack Ruby's attorney. Now, the thing with that was he was able to start speaking with Jack Ruby. I think it would have been about 1 o'clock that afternoon. So not maybe a little bit after that. So he met Jack Ruby on the 4th floor of City Hall. Jack Ruby was brought down from the 5th floor where he'd been, in the company of people like Patrick Dean and detectives Don Ray Archer, Barney Clardy, who else? McMillan, Forrest Sorrells for a little bit before then. And he's being detained. Yeah, he was being detained up there, was interrupted by Jack Ruby's attorney being ready to see him. So Ruby was taken down, and he only spent 10 minutes with Tom Howard. It was a private conversation, apparently. And it was only after that, number one, that Tom Howard started talking because it was through Tom Howard that we first publicly heard how Jack Ruby was supposed to have entered the basement. It was down the Main Street ramp.
Right.
And it was also only after his time with Tom Howard that Jack Ruby, we can be confident, said how he entered down the Main Street ramp as well, because this was noted down in the notes of Forrest Sorrells at like 3:15 when he and Fritz were interrogating Jack Ruby for the first time. So what we're saying is Tom Howard at the scene of the shooting in the seconds before, if not during, being in the immediate vicinity, presented himself as Jack Ruby's attorney nice and quickly, and started feeding out the narrative of how Jack Ruby entered the basement, and only after that did Jack Ruby start singing off the same hymn sheet. So very interesting character. And also you think about Howard, he was at that meeting at Ruby's apartment that night, where
talk about that. When was that meeting?
So that was that night. That was that evening at Ruby's apartment at he shared with George Senator.
Right.
So it was a meeting, very interesting, because so George Senator was Ruby's roommate, and on the night of the Oswald shooting, obviously Ruby's in custody. 2 out-of-town reporters, so Bill Kurther and Jim Hunter. Bill Hunter. Oh, sorry, I forgot those names wrong. Hunter and Kurther. Anyway, a couple of reporters were invited around to this meeting at Ruby's apartment. George Senator was there. Another attorney, Jim Martin, was there, and Tom Howard. So what was discussed there that night, if those walls could talk, you know what I mean? That would be very interesting, because There was even some interesting subsequent testimony that when Tom Howard heard that Oswald had been shot, before it was announced that it was Jack Ruby, sorry, not Tom Howard, George Senator, when he heard that Oswald had been shot, apparently George Senator called Jim Martin and said, Jack Ruby's going to need an attorney for shooting Oswald. So is that, I mean, clearly if that was true, again, foreknowledge on George Senator's part. But the other interesting aspect about that meeting, which I've uncovered very recently as well, is that when the FBI were carrying out their investigation about Ruby's movements on the morning of the 24th, what they did was they gathered up the details of all of the tenants at Jack Ruby's apartment at whatever it was, 223 Ewing Street, Notecliff. And it's in the documents. There's a list of all the tenants, and the apartment numbers. Ruby was at, I think it was 208. Thing is, on this list, literally the apartments next door and what would have been across the hallway from Ruby's are listed as vacant.
Wow.
Which wasn't the case, because get this, there was turns out there was a police officer that was actually a neighbour of Jack Ruby's at the time, over in 20, it would have been 20, it was across the hallway, so to 206 or 205. Fred Sexauer is his name.
Wow.
So he and two other DPD officers were actually all together in that apartment until at least the middle of October, when those other two police officers moved out and very oddly enough went to the same address, as where their next apartment was. And by all accounts, this Fred Sexauer was still in that apartment across from Jack Ruby's. Now, he was interviewed about that, but he, said that he found Jack Ruby to be of questionable character and, suspected him of homosexual activities with another tenant in another apartment there, and basically says nothing about, he didn't see Jack Ruby that morning. He was at church, on that Sunday morning. But unfortunately, this Fred Sexauer was never asked about anything that he might have seen or heard with that meeting at Ruby's apartment on that evening.
Wow. Yeah.
Really weird. And probably the only other detail to close out on that is that Fred Sexauer himself, he would move out of that apartment, and he went and his address was the exact same one as the two other, where the two Dallas police officers that were his former roommates were as well, in the Hawthorne apartments. So how these guys were moving around with each other, and one of them still happened to be Ruby's neighbour at the time. You can just chalk that up to more of these crazy little coincidences that may mean something or may mean nothing at all. But yeah, if we could ever find out what took place in that meeting, George Senator lived a relatively long life. He died in 1992.
But Howard died suddenly, though, right? Howard died.
Yeah. So
when does he die?
In 65, suddenly of a heart attack.
Yeah, heart
so
attack.
65, and Kurther and Hunter. I get these mixed up. Hunter, Long Beach, California police station. He was shot, by a police officer, apparently mucking around with a revolver or something with another colleague. So there you go. And Kurther got a karate chop in the neck. So three of these people at this summit at Ruby's apartment that evening all met very, quick deaths. Is again coincidence, or does it mean something? Who knows? I think, I wish we knew a little bit more about what Dorothy Kilgallen, spoke to and found out from Jack Ruby when she got to interview him. But of course we know very little on that front as well.
And of course, she dies suddenly too. I mean, yeah, crazy stuff. That meeting, there'd be a fly on the wall in that meeting. I mean, that would have been amazing. Who knows what was discussed there?
It's up there with, to think about what Oswald actually said, during his interrogations. If only we could, be transported back to observe that as well. Who knows?
We will be right back. All right, Sean. So I want to take a minute to recognize one of our longtime sponsors. He's been with us almost since the beginning. DK's Corner, located at 201 Cherry Street in Jessup, Pennsylvania. DK's Corner is a fantastic place to get some food. They have breakfast, lunch, dinner, all kinds of different items on the menu, Sean. We always talk about how good their cheesesteaks are. They have a great chicken cheesesteak as well, where they use real grilled chopped chicken. I don't know if you've had that, Sean.
I have. It's tremendous, Billy. Just like everything else on that menu.
Really good, really good. And now that now that summer party season is coming up, they do catering too. So
yes.
If you have a party going on in the area and you need a caterer off premises, they can do that as well at any price point. You just need a few pans of food or a whole party package. They can do it all. Give Dave a call at 570-209-0278 or message him on Facebook. Just go to Facebook and look for DK's Corner. Finalize your menu, your party menu with Dave, and I mean, just so much good food, Sean. And I know you order from there all the time.
I do. I order there quite a bit. The pizza's tremendous. I mean, I could recommend everything on there. He's real creative with the menu. And he's always updating it constantly and trying new things, and just a tremendous place.
Oh, and he's got stuff for takeout too. He's got a freezer that is stocked that with cappelletti and all kinds of homemade sauces and pastas. He's got ricotta, gnocchi. He's got all kinds of different things in there. Really, just delicious stuff. And now, like I said, with summer, they're going to release some new lighter summer options like taco salad. And new crispy shrimp tempura salad, which sounds fantastic. Like I mentioned before, he's got breakfast. He's got breakfast sandwiches, specialty desserts. I mean, everybody, the whole family can find something there, Sean, that they like. DK's Corner, 201 Cherry Street, Jessup, Pennsylvania. He's open Tuesday through Friday, 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. You can give him a call, 570-209-0278. Look him up on Facebook at DK's Corner. You can do DoorDash also, right, Sean? Do you do that?
Do DoorDash. And Bill, I recommend to dozens and dozens of people to go to DK's, and nobody's ever been disappointed. Everybody highly recommends it. They recommend other people. Our podcast, a lot of our listeners have gone to DK's after listening to our podcast, and everybody loves his restaurant. It's just tremendous.
It's fantastic. DK's Corner, highly recommended by the That's Enough Out of You podcast. They get our stamp of approval, our recommendation. And Dave, thank you for being a sponsor for us for so long.
Thank you, Dave.
We will be right back. So, Sean, we want to take a minute and tell our viewers and our listeners about our Patreon. You can go to Patreon and find us there. Search for That's Enough Out of You. We do a weekly show on our Patreon that for our paid subscribers, it's called The Speakeasy. It's a little bit different than this show. We kind of talk about current events. It's just kind of a little bit more casual chit chat between you and I, but we always have some interesting topics to talk about. And every once in a while we have a guest on. We just had our 100th episode. We celebrated our 100th Speakeasy episode on the Patreon. That was a lot of fun. We had our friend Mike Pilch, who is one of our subscribers, and he's also pretty active in the topic we were talking about on that Speakeasy. But and then Sean, I mean, you put some great information up there, lots of articles every single day.
Yeah, Bill, I read a lot of articles on there. I try to put up at least 3 or 4 every day. A lot of them are on the documents at the National Archives. I go through the JFK documents, the JFK records, the RFK records, the MLK records, and even the Epstein files, Bill. And we go through and I do a lot of, I put the direct link there so people could see the document for themselves. And also, I write a lot of information, my opinion on some of the things. And then I write other articles on important stuff like the CIA regime changes and different things on different characters that are out there right now that we think are impacting a lot of the bad stuff that are happening. And it creates a great discussion, Bill, because we have a great community of Patreon members. Some of the authors that we have on our show are members, and it just generates a great community chat. I think the best community out there. Just great discussion, and when you get a couple different eyeballs on these things, they really find different doors to open, and it leads to different avenues, and it's just tremendous on there.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that's what sets us apart from a lot of these others paid subscriptions, is we have such a great audience, and so much great discussion takes place in our chat. And like you said, many of the authors that are supporting our programming are Patreons, and they contribute. We'll do previews sometimes of upcoming episodes, kind of let the audience know what's coming out before it actually comes out. After we record an episode, I know you always go out there and put something on there about that, and
I put out the future schedules and stuff so people could see.
Yeah, just great content. Very, very supportive. It's just a great atmosphere. We don't tolerate any kind of trolls or anything like that. That you're not going to find that in our Patreon. And really just a fantastic, great vibe, great contributions.
Even when you get debates, Billy, you get, it's always respectful and
absolutely
back and forth. It's nothing, no trolls.
Right, absolutely. So definitely check us out on Patreon. Just go to Patreon, search for That's Enough Out of You. You'll find us there. You'll see our logo, and you can sign up for as little as $1 a month. We have the free option as well. You don't get quite as much with that, but you can sign up for as little as $1. There's different tiers you can look at to contribute. And again, all of it goes to helping the show stay afloat. I mean, we don't get paid for the show, Sean. We do this because we feel a responsibility.
We're not like these right-wing podcasters that are, bankrolled to the hilt, Billy. I mean, we're out here doing this, trying to get the truth out. And
absolutely,
we do have a merch store, Bill. We also have a bookshop. People want to really get, some of the books from our authors. Because the money goes to local bookstores, it goes to the author and the publisher, and a little bit to us. So support instead of supporting big companies, and you can support local bookstores, and you can support the authors that we have on our show, Bill, because we have a ton of books up there, and anything that people want added, we could add as long as it's in the inventory.
Absolutely. Yeah, so if you want to, support independent content creators, Patreon is a great place to do that. We have found Patreon has been really, really good to us. We've built up this fantastic community, so definitely recommend you guys going out there, check it out, and hope you enjoy it. Sean, anything else?
No, I think we're good to go, Billy. Just sign up and join the community and check us out.
All right. And as always, we thank our Patreons who have already subscribed. We really appreciate your support. Absolutely. And hope to see the rest of you guys there. So thank you.
Another person I want you to talk about, and we talked about him before, but I want to know if there's anything new in your research with him, and that's the reporter Jerry O'Leary. Very suspicious.
Yeah, he so very instrumental in publishing and really establishing Oswald as the lone nut communist. And I say that because to walk it back for your audience, Jerry O'Leary at the time was a reporter with the Washington Evening Star, and like so many other reporters, descended upon Dallas, in the afternoon of Friday, November 22nd, and was doing their work to cover the aftermath of the assassination. Turns out though that Jerry O'Leary was in contact with the FBI, and he actually acted upon on their behalf in terms of the reining in of Dallas Police Chief Jesse Curry. I'll say that because Jesse Curry, I don't know if you guys know, there's a clip on YouTube of Curry holding court in his office, talking to reporters like Tom Pettit and Peggy Simpson, saying that it's customary for the FBI to let us know of any of these communist and subversive types being in the city before an event as important as the president coming to town, but they didn't do that in this instance. So Jesse Curry probably being incredibly truthful there, but of course the repercussions for that were felt and heard instantly. It got all the way up to J. Edgar Hoover. It did not look good that the police chief in Dallas was saying that the FBI didn't let them know about someone that they ought to have, as per the normal custom. So Jerry O'Leary was enlisted to get an interview with one-on-one interview with Chief Curry, and basically give him a chance to walk back his statements. Now, I don't know if that interview happened, but the plan was that he would write an article and basically give Curry the chance to apologise. Don't know if that actually happened, but because Curry just got on in front of the cameras and gave a statement himself, walking back those what he mentioned about the FBI. So anyway, Jerry O'Leary, he also he was there when the backyard photos were discovered at Ruth Payne's house. He was man everywhere that weekend. And I say he was instrumental in the publishing of the lone nut communist narrative, because what happened was, on the day after Oswald's shooting, he wrote a story covering the Oswald shooting and all of that, and he ascribed to Oswald the statement that he was calling out for the ACLU at the start of his transfer, at the third floor when they were setting out. No one else present substantiated that. None of the police, other reporters that were allegedly there with them as well. No one substantiated that. But O'Leary came out, and this article was heavily pinning Oswald lone nut communist, calling out for the ACLU. So I think that claim that he made is why we had the whole three reporters being able to race the elevator, Oswald in the elevator down non-continuous steps, because O'Leary had to back up his claim about the ACLU statement, but it turned out he was also filmed walking out into the basement about 10 seconds before Oswald's shooting. So Linda Giovanni Zambonini helped me with that one as well, to work that out. So
he's great.
he was there at the shooting. He was clearly working with the FBI to get the lone nut communist aspect out as well, because there was a very famous memo that went out on the afternoon of Oswald's shooting, before O'Leary got his famous article out, and said, we need to now make take every step. It was Alan Belmont, I think, who issued the memo, that take every step to make sure that the public is satisfied that the assassination was at the hands of a communist Marxist subversive, and play down the conspiracy aspect. And that's how O'Leary was able to sweep in with his crucial article. But also, while he was in Dallas, again, this is on record. Jerry O'Leary met a CIA man, an unimpeachable source.
And that was on the 27th, right? The 27th, he met him?
Yeah. Crucially, before the Warren Commission was announced, and I'll get to why that's crucial. But absolutely, unimpeachable source of a man as a CIA contact, who apparently told O'Leary that Oswald returned from Mexico the month prior with $5,000 cash, full sentence stop. That was all that was told to O'Leary. Now, whether O'Leary ever intended to bring out that scoop, publish that as a scoop, or was just meant to feed it up to the FBI because he could be trusted to do that by his CIA contacts, who knows? It's interesting, and either point is possible, because O'Leary himself was named as a media asset within Operation Mockingbird around the time of the HSCA. Carl Bernstein brought out a famous Rolling Stone article that named him alongside Hal Hendricks as being, Mockingbird. So what O'Leary did with his scoop was he didn't publish it. He fed it straight back up to the FBI, who took it to the State Department. It went as far as the White House, and I think that was the little incident down in Mexico City that Lyndon Johnson used to sandbag Earl Warren into place to head up the commission, because at that time as well, whoever was behind the plots to kill President Kennedy, they clearly had these first little Easter eggs ready to go. These pre-prepared narratives about Oswald being linked to Cuba, and and all of that. So I think with Lyndon Johnson kind of smartly wanting to avoid World War III, he and the government were indeed compelled to bury information like that and put it all on Oswald, basically. So yeah, O'Leary, I think he was right in the middle of that. He was an FBI asset, clearly. There's prior history of him assisting the FBI. I don't know if you guys know about the Alfred Coors case. The Coors beer heir was kidnapped and murdered, and so O'Leary was he was writing articles which were keeping the public awareness, out, and eventually led to the apprehension of what was his name, Joseph Corbett or someone. And in years later, O'Leary was getting himself ready to do the same thing for the Martin Luther King assassination. But then, of course, they found James Earl Ray in London or wherever it was. So, a very interesting man indeed, O'Leary. He could probably have his own book. And he was a U.S. Marine Reserve as well. So there you go.
Well, the interesting thing about O'Leary, because I've been really deep into the documents for a while now, and the one thing and I talked about this on the podcast before, is that the control that the CIA had in the media is really unbelievable. And I found so many documents where a CIA official would write something and then give it to their asset in the media, and the asset would print that verbatim and put their name to it. For instance, William Harvey wrote this piece on Fidel Castro, and it was all propaganda, it was all crap. And he gave it to his asset in the Miami Herald, and they printed it, and the asset put his name to it. So that's the thing with O'Leary, the information, the fact that he's meeting the CIA man on the 27th, giving him this information. I mean, it's so consistent with what I found in so many different documents where when I say the CIA has an asset in the media, I mean, that's what the asset does. I mean, they're basically just, putting out the information that the CIA wants to the public.
Absolutely. And O'Leary's got prior game in that as well. It turned out he went way back with David Atlee Phillips, to Chile back in '53. They were both working in the media back then. O'Leary, he goes way back to he left his job as a reporter for the Washington Evening Star to go and serve in World War II, and thereafter remained a reserve with the Marine Corps. And he ran in the same circles as David Phillips. So come to 1962, and just after the missile crisis, Jerry O'Leary has this neat article that he puts out, referring to the DRE and the fact that Russian missiles are still being hidden in caves in Cuba after they were meant to have been removed after the missile crisis. So right there, that talks perfectly to what you're saying, Sean. That O'Leary is basically a mouthpiece for the CIA and his very good friend David Atlee Phillips. Like, we're not just drawing dots here. We've got string which can literally link people with very firm modus operandi.
I'm going to talk about Phillips for a second, if you don't mind, because I watched you on the Cipher podcast, the Cipher Pass podcast with Tim and Eli, and it was a great episode. But the one thing is, when you guys were talking about David Atlee Phillips and you were talking about John Newman's research, and of course, we had John on our show, and I personally think that John's original research, I think he was correct, and a lot of the stuff he did, like when Oswald and the CIA, and he exposes Angleton and the Costa Cove, and he called that a virus. And I think he was right. Now he changed his mind on Angleton, and now he thinks Angleton was probably tricked. And I know there's a lot of people in the research community that say that Phillips might have been tricked in Angleton. And here's my take on this. And John has really put into question the Antonio Veciana, Phillips connection. And my thing is that Veciana is not the only person that said, Phillips was Maurice Bishop. There's about 5 or 6 CIA officials that said that Bishop was Phillips, and Gaten Fonzie did a lot of great work on that. And the other important thing about it is Veciana is not the only person that said he's seen Oswald with David Atlee Phillips, because Robert Tannenbaum said that he saw a training tape, and Phillips was on that tape with Oswald. So what I'm saying is, because I know you guys were questioning, well, why would Phillips meet with Oswald, right? But the thing is, sometimes these guys are really arrogant. Like, why would Alan Dulles put on his day calendar that he's at the farm the weekend of assassination? Because these guys think they're untouchable. But I think, if you're going to discredit Vesiana, you also got to discredit Tannenbaum now. And you also got to discredit those other people that say, my point is, like Professor Pablo says, Phillips links at every touch point. Like, it's hard to move certain characters from the story. Phillips is one, Angleton is another. William Harvey's impossible to remove. I don't know, with the documents we have now, I don't know how anybody could think he's right in the middle of this whole thing. But I think that's very interesting. The O'Leary link to Phillips is fascinating, because Phillips also connects to Claire Booth Luce, who I've been doing a lot of work on. And there's documents, with Luce, and of course, we know now from a document Harvey asked for security clearance to meet with Claire Booth Luce, and that was in late July, about 4 months before the assassination of JFK. So all this is important, I think, and O'Leary's connection is definitely important.
Yeah, absolutely. With Phillips as well, and some of the other people that you name, it just occurs to me, because obviously largely my focus for the last few years has been about the Oswald shooting, but the way things I see these things being set up is that the only full person wouldn't have been Oswald, and then later when things went wrong, Tippett. I think people would have been set up in the planning as well.
Oh, sure.
And that's where I wonder, maybe someone, and I get the optics of Phillips and his arrogance, especially with how he conducted himself in the 70s. I certainly get that angle as well. But the majority of his fingerprints, if I'm not mistaken, is over the discrediting of the FPCC, and setting Oswald up as being instrumental in that, be it in New Orleans. So we've got the training camps, overseeing Oswald, if not directly, indirectly, as both a pro and anti-Castro provocateur. So might that have been used by the plotters, to position Phillips as someone that could be seen as Oswald's handler, if people were digging into things after the fact. That's a question of mine.
I had this conversation with Bill Simpich about that, and Bill's take is that Angleton was probably tricked, and me and him had a little back and forth, which was respectful, and it was a great discussion, and
I enjoyed it. Yeah,
discussion. But his whole point is, Angleton, Phillips, like, why would they drag mud into their own house with this whole thing? And my point is, well, the guy they want to suck into this whole investigation is John McCone. That's the guy they're trying to bring in. Because remember, Dulles is fired. Dulles is not. John McCone is he's the figurehead of the CIA right now, even though he doesn't have the real power. Richard Helms and these guys don't respect McCone. They respect, Helms a lot more than McCone, because all these guys are the old boy network. McCone's not part of that, but they need him to go to the cover up and to present the coast to coast stuff and all this other stuff. So I think that's the guy they're ultimately, trying to suck into their, the whole conspiracy thing.
Yeah, possibly. And I'm going to go devil's advocate as well. And now it's a pretty good pun when I say that. But what about Alan Dulles? Let's talk about him for a second, because would he, if his fingerprints were over the planning of the assassination of Kennedy, would he be so silly to let someone that could be linked to him indirectly his linkage to George de Mohrenschildt? Would he want to let that?
Well,
would he want someone handled by someone that he has links to?
He has a lot of indirect, really one connection removed from the connection to the Paines too. We're root to Michael Paine. So here's my take. on Dulles. So a lot of people, I know there's a movement now. A lot of people think they're saying that Dulles had dementia. From my research, that Dulles, if he had any onsets of dementia, would have been later in his life, 68, 69, before he passed. But 63, I think he's as sharp as a tack because they need him. Remember, they're pushing him to get on the Warren Commission because we talked to Lisa Pease and we went over the whole day calendar. The people he's meeting are connected to powerful people like the Rockefellers. And these people get in the ear of Lyndon Johnson to make sure Dulles is on the commission. They don't want, I mean, if he has dementia, there's no reason, to put him on it. They want somebody who's going to deflect, misdirect, and really protect these sensitive operations like the Castro plots and different things. And remember, Dulles is in the room when DeMornshield's being questioned. So he's making sure that, he's giving him that evil eye. He's making sure DeMornshield isn't saying anything about the fact that he was 10 years old when he met Alan Dulles and he knew him that long. So, but he's not bringing that up, so I think they would be that cocky because I think Dulles, I think he wants to be. There's an interview with him, and I forget who it was, but it might have been Mark Lane or somebody. And Dulles was talking about how all these things had to go right for Oswald to get to Kennedy. And the person said, "My God, I think Alan Dulles is bragging about putting all this together." Like, I think that's how arrogant he was. I think Dulles, I think he wanted to, because remember, he also makes that comment, if people would have known, that I was, my mistress was a babysitter for Payne's and that I was in Dallas, because he was in Dallas a couple of weeks before the assassination on a book signing. He made that comment that, boy, conspiracy theories would have, they would have a field day with that, laughing about. So I think he would be that cocky.
Yeah.
But Billy, go ahead. Billy's got something to.
Yeah.
So Paul, if you don't mind, I'd like to go back to the Ruby stuff that you were talking about earlier, and it's just fascinating to me. And of course, the deeper and longer you get into this stuff, nothing really surprises you anymore. And just thinking about that famous photo that was taken of Ruby, right, shooting Oswald, and to think that maybe that wasn't really him, that's insane. But I guess my question, Paul, would be then, why would Ruby, why would he cop to it? Why wouldn't he say, that wasn't me, I didn't do it? That part, I guess I just don't understand. If you could maybe explain your theory on that.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. I'm at the moment. I'm asking questions, so I would literally be speculating even on that. But it could be as simple as admit to this, be the person we want you to be, because you'll be a hero. It'll be seen as an act of premeditation. So pretty much how they might have made the pitch to him, or if he was coerced, if he actually, assuming that he was who shot Oswald as well. So I think, because he was talked about, is it heavily in debt at the time, and do we know if that was ever recovered or relaxed or whatever? We don't know, but I think because he wanted to be, well, he saw himself so ingrained in the police, do this for us, Jack, be here at this time. I mean, I've not gotten to that point of actually hammering out the mechanics, but I think if the Dallas police ask him to be a certain, be at a certain place for a certain reason, that'd be enough for him. And then added to that, could he have been coerced, strong-armed, threatened? If you're not involved in this the way we want you to be and how we want you to be, we'll get your family or something along those lines. I don't think it would have taken him much. Yeah. And then we think about the state he was in, because he was on Preludin, that morning. Apparently he took medicated speed. He was on speed that morning, and he was in some kind of weird state. His moods, from literally after the shooting, right the way through until when he heard that Oswald was killed. He was on edge, and obviously, and initially bewildered why he was being set upon by the Dallas police. Could he have been under some kind of altered mind state. You know, he was visited by Jolly West.
Jolly West.
I mean, like he was on drugs. He was in wondering why people was set upon him. He was he had Patrick Dean, you know, attributing things to him up on the fifth floor jail office, you know, before he'd been formally charged, but was what was used against him in trial for him to be sentenced to execution. You know, there were just all these things that just, again, like I say at the start, all these things that happened after the fact that that are just, you know, when you have one coincidence or one little anomaly, you know, in isolation, that's all it is. But when you have, you know, patterns of evidence gaps and, you know, people attributing statements and contradictions and all of that.
Here's one thing.
Oh, and maybe they convinced him that he did it. You know,
here's one thing. Though. If we go, you know, to believe the Julianne Mercer statement that Ruby was involved in the actual assassination of Kennedy, dropping off one of the assassins, then he could have been strong-armed. They could have said to him, "Hey, we'll blame this whole thing on you and Oswald." So you get rid of him, and you're not going to do any time, this and that. So that could have been one possible way they just strong-arm him. If he was involved, if we believe Julianne Mercer, then he's already knee-deep into it.
And if you read Ruby's statements as well, he doesn't go into decent detail about anything. You know, even when he's got Earl Warren and Gerald Ford in front of him, and, you know, when he was pleading to be taken back to Washington, like he does not go into any great detail about going to the Western Union. You know, he corroborates that he was called by one of his girls to transfer money. He doesn't talk about the call the evening before in any great detail. And you know, how he got down the ramp, you know, everything like this is all very vague, and just, he says it, but, you know, it wouldn't have taken much for, you know, someone like Tom Howard or you know, to get to him and say, this is a story, run with it, you know, or you will be in trouble. But one thing that I have come across more recently as well is it was after I was on the Lone Gunman podcast that one of their viewers pointed me out to some really, really interesting footage taken from immediately after the shooting in the basement. I don't know if you guys saw my article on Substack about this, but what happened was, obviously the cameras didn't stop rolling, and what happened was Tom Pettit, you know, the reporter in the white trench coat with the glasses, microphone, he was kind of roaming around the immediate area just trying to speak to anyone that he could, and, you know, was being prompted to talk about this and talk about that. 7 minutes after the shooting, he kind of sidles up to a group of police personnel that were kind of just before the door in the background. And one of them is Roy Lowry, talking about how a camera was being wheeled out, and that he thought, you know, he watched it, you know, it was almost about to topple over and things like that, and thought that might have been how the shooter came in. And then another voice pops up and says, yeah, I saw the man climb over the climb past the green car and over the railing, and I saw the gun. That's literally what can be heard in this footage. And it turns out that man was Blackie Harrison. Wow. Blackie Harrison, he's obscured himself from the camera, but you can tell it's Blackie Harrison because Harrison's filmed kind of loitering around in the corridor there, and it's him that, you know, also sidles into this conversation and has his little bit to say he saw the man who you know, get into position, and he saw the gun, like it was all one continuous thing. Interesting thing about that is that Blackie Harrison made no such mention of that thereafter. You know, so we're talking 7 minutes after the shooting, and then all of his statements that he gave to the DPD, the FBI, and the Warren Commission, no mention whatsoever. Interesting thing on that is, as well, is that Blackie Harrison knew Jack Ruby for 12 years before that point. So right. What was he doing there? So if he so clearly saw the man who would shoot Oswald get into position, surely would have recognised him as his, this Jack Ruby that he knew for 12 years.
Right.
So what's he playing at there? Is he trying to muddy the waters, and suggesting that, the shooter could have only come from if you have a look at my screen background here, I can probably this is pretty cool. I can actually point out, this is the only known piece of visual record of the eastern end of the basement. So who you have here is that would be Reserve Captain Charles Arnett. I reckon that's Sergeant James Putnam, and the figure here, that's Gano Woolley. So I reckon this is from a frame of footage, one of the cameras that literally swiveled all the way around from its position of where it would film Oswald coming out and literally film the behind it. So this is the only time we actually get to see the eastern end of the basement. So this particular area is where Blackie Harrison said he saw the man who shot Oswald emerge from, but he didn't identify him as Ruby there and then. And that takes me back to the earlier point. What would have been the big deal for anyone who knew Jack Ruby if they saw him get into position? Right. So things like that, Harrison, playing the games that he is there. Was that an actual honest account from Harrison? That he was being, as we say in Australia, fair income about where he actually saw the man who would shoot Oswald emerge from. And then obviously when the narrative came out that it was Jack Ruby and he was to be, could only have been him, he fell into line very quickly. So, Sorry, Bill. I don't know if I answered your point there, but
for sure. Yeah.
I think Ruby could have been made to say anything he wanted because he could have been on some kind of altered state. He could have been on drugs. He could have been coerced. He could have been paid up. Promised early release. Been walked out of jail a hero. For something that he didn't do, but was positioned as doing.
Yeah. Crazy.
Stranger things have happened.
Oh, that's for sure.
This is cool because it shows people, I don't know if you guys remember, and I know John Armstrong and David Josephs spoke about it as well, as if we're to believe that the narrative that it was Jack Ruby who transferred the money from the Western Union and walked along Main Street. He certainly didn't come down Main Street ramp. He came through the outer door of the basement, the outer door of the annex building next door. And if you see in the corner here, there's a pylon which is kind of just obscuring the door. That is the door that Western Union Ruby, let's call him, could have only have walked out of, and just the short distance, along this way, to climb through the railing, as Blackie Harrison said he saw, and be in position.
I think Ruby still. There's so many questions still around Ruby, and that we don't have the answers to, and the fact that most people do assume that it was a contingency plan, and I think most researchers would agree that something happened there. Oswald was supposed to be taken out quicker, and something had to happen. Who knows how he got away and what happened there? I forget who I was talking to recently said that. They said that Oswald was supposed to be taken out of the country and killed out of the country. I think it was Stu Wexler said that. But regardless, I mean, Oswald being alive, at that time, it presents a problem for the conspirators. So, Ruby had to be the contingency, but there's so many open questions that we don't have. And the fact that we don't have these files that are still being classified after all these years, it's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous.
But there's so much good work with what we do have, So, whether you think my work's good or not, I've been able to turn out a hell of a lot of stuff that's already been out there. And I know, Sean, you've been digging in and producing some things as well. Like we need more people doing some proper data mining, as I call it, and what Eli Frame did with making document compendiums searchable is amazing. I don't know if you guys have seen that, but he did that for
Yeah, I
the
did.
Garrison
Yeah,
index.
Armstrong stuff he's got.
Yeah.
And Armstrong's, I mean, it's amazing.
Yeah,
My index is 42,000 lines of a spreadsheet, but now anyone can use this tool that Eli's put out there, and he's just made it all searchable. It's amazing. So, that little bit by bit, as a community, there's a lot of good work that's happening out there to make proper research, truly sensible and evidence-based work all the more easier and accessible, which is great.
Yeah, it's incredible work that you've done too, Paul, with the files and everything, just amazing. The
Garrison notes,
the Garrison notes for sure. Yeah. So
thanks. I mean, it's just it was just a way to make life a bit easier for other researchers, because again, not one of us has the single answer, but we're putting pieces on a puzzle board together bit by bit. Will we get the full picture? No, we won't ever. We won't. But you can make cases all the more solid with layers of evidence, and that's what you need to do.
Puzzle,
Keep layering them up.
little bit at a time. Yep.
Yeah.
Well, Paul, every time we have you on, the hour just flies by. So it's
Wow.
amazing.
It's
hard to believe we've been here for an hour. So, well, we appreciate your time, and we always love when you're on with us, and hope to get you back real soon.
Yeah, definitely.
Absolutely, guys. Ready when you are. It's good to chat, and I appreciate you hearing me out. It's probably a bit of a strange, devil's advocate kind of theme, which I've come on today to kind of question the Ruby narrative. But by the time this comes out, my series will probably be fully published, and hopefully people will see that it's not about making an outlandish claim for the sake of it.
Right.
I don't come to my conclusions in a hurry. I do my work, and I might not be always correct, but I've done that spreadsheet, and I wrote a book on evidence that's available to everyone. So all I want is for people just to keep the questions and the perspective open, because while we do that, and it's how I end off my book. The perpetrators of all layers of the the world-changing event that was President Kennedy's assassination will remain on the hook of truth. As long as we keep them up there. Whether it's Dulles, Phillips, Harvey, Ruby, and Angleton, whoever, Oswald, they need to remain to be figures of sensible scrutiny. So let's keep on that.
Yeah. Well, tremendous stuff, Paul. Great research, buddy. And I hope people follow you on Twitter and your Substack and
the book, Death to Justice: The Shooting of Lee Harvey Oswald.
Yeah.
Absolutely. We'll put up a link to your Substack, and we have your book, I believe, on our bookshop.
Yeah, it's on the bookshop. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Thanks, guys.
Yeah. All right, Paul. Thank you very much. We appreciate your time, man. We'll talk to you next time.
Talk to you again.
All right.
Thanks,
okay. That's Enough Out of You podcast is executive produced and written by Bill Rader and Sean Kane, and edited by Bill Rader. The That's Enough Out of You podcast and logo are exclusive property of Bags of Chicken, LLC. Any rebroadcast, retransmission, or accounts of this podcast without the express written consent of Bags of Chicken, LLC is prohibited. So don't even try it.